what causes these micronutrient inadequacies or deficiencies? I mean, vitamin D, magnesium, vitamin K. Obviously, vitamin D gets a lot of play in the media,
Right.
but what are the causes? Like, why do people not get enough of these? Assuming, let's just say for the sake of argument, that they're not consuming purely empty calories.
Right.
So if they're not on the the McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King,
Right.
breakfast, lunch, dinner
that
diet.
would be clear. So, the reality is that if we're talking about, when I say micronutrient inadequacy versus a deficiency, I'm not talking about someone that is, when you're really deficient and you're at the point where you're having a clinical, manifestation of that deficiency, for example, vitamin C and scurvy.
Right.
You're not, when you have scurvy, that's not the first sign of deficiency, that's pre-mortality. I mean, that's the sign that you're going to die.
So inadequacy could mean it's in the labs within the quote normal range, but it's not where
necessarily.
Okay.
Inadequacy means you're not so deficient that you're going to have a clinical symptom that's measurable, like your gums are falling out.
Yeah.
But you will, for example, not be making collagen properly.
Right.
Because that's what vitamin C is a cofactor for.
Right.
So in the case of, micronutrients like magnesium, vitamin K, so magnesium is at the center of a chlorophyll molecule, so it's found in dark green leafy vegetables. Men need around 400 milligrams a day, women about 320 or so, and people aren't meeting those requirements because they're not actually eating enough of the foods that have magnesium. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. There's also a lot of confounding factors. Athletes often sweat out more, so they actually require more than non-athletes. And then you have things like magnesium being tied up in phytates, which is like the phosphorus source in plants, and that is hard for us to digest, or our absorption isn't that, we still get it, but it's not as bioavailable.
Right.
There's a lot of things. I think mostly the number one thing is we aren't eating enough dark green leafy greens.
Got it.
And for magnesium, magnesium is essential for about 300 different enzymes in your body.
Yeah.
And in our lab, we have a theory which we are now starting to prove, which is called the triage theory. Yeah. And what this theory is that, during our evolution, we went through periods of starvation where, we couldn't get enough food, and, there are these periodic points where we go through starvation. We think that our body has very strategically set up mechanisms that it can ration micronutrients to the proteins and enzymes in our body that are essential for survival, for reproduction, the sodium potassium pump, you're clotting, you don't want to, hemorrhage out. So all these proteins that require micronutrients for short-term survival get their pick first. Whereas ones like enzymes involved in DNA repair, which repair DNA damage, well, DNA damage accumulates over time, and that doesn't have a problem until the 5th or 6th decade in your life.
Right.
So we started to test
well past your Darwinian usefulness.
Exactly.
Right.
And we started to test this. We were looking at, if you look, cofactors, the way they work, you have enzymes in your body, and these enzymes are what are doing everything. You have a DNA repair enzyme that needs magnesium. There's a binding constant. That protein will bind to this cofactor, to this mineral, at a certain rate. And so you can look at proteins that are involved, for example, vitamin K, that's involved in the clotting of your blood, versus other proteins that require vitamin K, which are involved in making sure you don't get calcification in your bloodstream. So clotting is a very essential short-term survival protein. As I just mentioned, you don't want to hemorrhage out. Versus this other protein that's involved, that needs vitamin K to work, is essential to make sure you don't have calcification of the arteries. Well, that's something that doesn't rear its head till later in life.
Right.
So we look at the binding constants of those two proteins. Sure enough, the one that's involved in clotting has a much tighter binding, so more of it's going to that protein.
Got it.
And so what we think is going on, so let me just mention, about 60% of the US population has inadequate levels of vitamin K. 45% of the US population has inadequate levels of magnesium.
For my own clarification, so it would seem then, in this particular case, if you have an inadequate intake of magnesium or vitamin K, that what you do consume will be shunted to these short-term needs, but you'll suffer the consequences of a then non-suboptimal level of DNA repair, for instance.
Exactly.
Which could lead to mutations that lead to cancer.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. And with the vitamin K, you'll have calcification in arteries, which can lead to cardiovascular diseases, can lead to brain vascular diseases. So what we think is going on is there is these micronutrient inadequacies are causing what we call insidious damage, where it's just a little bit of damage every day.
Just war of attrition.
Right. It's just going on. And by the time you're 50, 60 years old, you start to come down with these age-related diseases. They're age-related diseases for a reason, you know. So we think that getting people up to snuff on their micronutrient intake is a very important role in preventative medicine, because we're going to instead of trying to patch someone up after they're falling apart, we're going to extend the healthier part of their life, so extend their health span.
It's also it's very difficult to acutely reverse a chronic condition.
It is.
That has reached a precipitation point where you're exhibiting massive symptoms like Alzheimer's.